Hi guys, and in today's video for PSO2 NGS, I'm going to cover the new M.A.R.S system. Hi everyone, welcome back to another video for Phantasy Star Online-related New Genesis. So in today's video, we're going to cover the newly released M.A.R.S that was added to the game. So M.A.R.S, if you're not sure what it is, it was revealed on the headline a few months back. And essentially what this is, it's a new ability that all characters can use. And think of it as something like another option to use in addition to your photon blasts. And it probably functions more similar to the dark blast system from PSO2 base. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to go through how you access M.A.R.S, all the different customization you can do with it, and just a brief showcase of how each version of M.A.R.S plays as well. So first thing we need to cover is how you actually get M.A.R.S. So to do that, you want to go to your class counter, which you can do in any city. You may have to progress beyond a certain point in the story potentially, so I would advise probably just going through the story that we've got so far. I don't know for sure if you have to unlock a certain point in story to get this, but I would just do it anyway. So what you'll get is when you go to the class counter, you'll have this new option for M.A.R.S skills. So when you go into M.A.R.S skills here, this is where you actually adjust the loadout for your M.A.R.S. Other thing that you need to know is to actually activate M.A.R.S, you have a button, an icon on your palette. So you can see at the bottom of the screen here, we have just next to our photon blast, we have this icon here, and this is the way to activate and deactivate M.A.R.S. So what you want to do is, just like with anything else on your palette, if you go into your sub palette menu, you can see that we have an option for M.A.R.S here to select it. So this is how you actually add M.A.R.S to your palette to be able to activate it. However, M.A.R.S also has its own palette as well. So M.A.R.S has what's called the M.A.R.S palette. So again, just from the main menu, if you go to gear and sub palette and go down to M.A.R.S palette, this here is a way of configuring your M.A.R.S. So this is how you change which weapons you're using and which skills you want to use or which photon arts that you want to use for it, as well as weapon actions. You can also do another few things here as well. So you can choose different skill trees, which I'll go into in a minute. There is also some options here for whether you wanted to play the comm voice. What this is, when you activate M.A.R.S or when you use certain abilities, every so often you'll hear like a computerized voice that says things like, you know, overboost enabled and different phrases like that. It'll also alert you when the time is about to run out on your M.A.R.S as well. So you can choose whether you want to hear that or not, and you can also choose whether you want that voice to be in Japanese or English. We do also have a sub-weapon as well, so I'll go into the actual specifics of how the M.A.R.S is split up in a minute. So next up, we mentioned a little bit before, but there is also a skill tree system for M.A.R.S. So if we go into here, and we go to M.A.R.S skills, we have M.A.R.S skill learning and M.A.R.S skill point exchange. So what you want to do is, there's a couple of little client orders that you want to complete, or tasks, which will give you these points. When you go into the skill point exchange, what you want to do here is you can actually assign your skill points here. So you can also trade in things called M.A.R.S updaters to get skill points as well. So for the actual skills, if you go into M.A.R.S skill learning, what you can see here is you have 3 skill trees. So it's up to you which ones you want to go with. And if we go into our first skill tree, for example, it works very, very similar to your regular character skill trees. So what you can see here is we've got different subsections. So we've got skills for each weapon, which again, I'll go into the weapon shortly. And just like your normal skill trees, you just use L1 and R1 to select these, whether you want the skills or not. We also have some skills for the sub-weapons as well. And there's also some common skills as well. And some of these are quite actually big point sinks as well. So you will want to keep leveling up your skill trees. So you might be thinking, well, how do I actually get the skill points to unlock these skills? As I said, there is a task you can do early on, which will give you 30 to start with. But if you want to get any additional ones, the way you get them is there are certain quests that reward them. But one of the easiest ways to get it is through your tasks menu. So if you go into your tasks and go to your weekly tasks, there is a task here, which is suppress enemies with M.A.R.S. And it's to kill 1,000 enemies with M.A.R.S equipped. And for that, completing that, you get 1 M.A.R.S updater and 10 star gems. So it's going to be a slow process to unlock everything for your M.A.R.S, but it will give you something to do. And as I said, this is a regular weekly task that will just refresh every week. So that's how you actually get the M.A.R.S updaters. They may provide other ways of getting them through campaigns and things like that as well. So with that said, next thing we need to do is we need to look at the actual weapon loadouts for M.A.R.S. So by default, M.A.R.S has 4 main weapons and 3 sub-weapons. SEGA may add more in future, but for the time being, at time of recording, we have 4 main weapons and 3 subs. So these 4 weapons, if we go into the M.A.R.S skills, you can see we have VA1 SRM Garm. This is a main weapon, and if this is it's a great sword that you use for melee. We have VA2 M.A.R.M Nidhog, which is another melee main weapon, which is a scythe. We have VA3 LRM Hydra, which is a cannon for range attacks. And we have VA4 XRM Scylla, which is a rod that uses... I'm not going to say it uses technique attacks necessarily, but it's another kind of ranged attack. I'll show you how they work in a minute. We then also have a few sub-weapons. So we have SA1 HMP Fenrir. Fenrir is a support weapon. So the support weapons, all of them will do additional attacks that will add on to the attacks that you do. But in addition to that, all of the sub-weapons also have an extra function. So with Fenrir, for example, Fenrir gets stronger after it's been equipped for a little while, and it also does boost your movement speed a little bit as well. So it's like the aggressive one. Then we have SA2 HGP Fafnir. Fafnir is more of a defensive one, so Fafnir reduces damage that you take once your HP goes under a certain amount. So it's more for survivability. And then finally we have SA3 HFP Lindworm. So Lindworm is good for PP recovery. So it increases your PP recovery rate and your natural PP recovery rate as well. So it's your PP recovery while attacking and while just regenerating normally. So those are your options. You then also have some common skills as well, which let you do things as well. Okay, so next up, let's actually show you what M.A.R.S does. So at the moment, at time of recording, there is a limited time quest in the game, which is specifically for a tutorial for how to use M.A.R.S. Now, I do feel it's really odd that SEGA have added it as a limited time quest, because this is a core feature of the game, and this should just be a tutorial quest that's available anytime. I don't see why it's limited time only. But to access it, as usual, just go to one of your quest counters. And all this quest is basically is a quest that has a few enemies in it. That some of them will attack you, some of them won't, and it just lets you try out M.A.R.S. Now, just a note on how M.A.R.S works. So with M.A.R.S, you will use 2 main weapons and you'll use 1 sub-weapon. If you want to switch between the 2 sub-weapons that you've got with you, you can do that on the fly. But if you want to use one of the other 2 that you're not using, you have to change that at in a city. You can't do that in a quest. Yeah. So I've got limited time quest and we've got this M.A.R.S training center. Just a note, because I've seen a lot of people complaining about this, saying they're stuck in the quest once they start it. There's no actual normal way out of this quest. The way that you get out of it, it actually tells you here. It says to end it, go to quest info under tasks and quests in the main menu and activate abandoned quest. That's how you get out of this quest. I've seen a lot of people complaining that they're stuck in the game, and I've had to close the game down and reopen the game to get out of this quest, which is just not true. You can just abandon out of it. So as we load in, so this is the M.A.R.S training center quest. So you can see we've got couple of enemies around. Now, this sword over here, if you go near it, will start attacking you from range, but it won't move from where it is. So this is really good for perfecting your counters. The Prag Bear won't attack you. I think the Remotus might attack you if you go near it as well. But the Crag Bear is essentially a training dummy. So the first thing we need to cover is about M.A.R.S battery. So M.A.R.S requires a battery to use. You can see at the bottom of our palette here, you might be able to see, it might be quite hard to see though. There is a little percentage gauge in this, and at the moment it's at 7%. And as I do anything, even standing still, it gradually charges up. Now these batteries, these will only be in certain quests. So these batteries will only be in certain quests. These batteries will give you an instant 40% battery charge. So if I take one of these, my battery goes from 12 to 52. And if I take another one, it goes up to 93. So this is how you charge your M.A.R.S battery. In most areas of the game, you won't have the access to these batteries, so it will just be reliant on that regular charge. Now, with M.A.R.S, you don't need to be at 100% battery to use it. You can activate M.A.R.S at any point from 25% battery or higher. The way that it works is when you activate it, the active duration of M.A.R.S depends on how much battery it has. So if you activate it at 25%, you'll be able to use it, but you'll only get maybe a few seconds out of it before it runs out. Whereas if you let it charge to 100, you'll get a lot more usage out of it. Similarly, because of that, one of the best uses of M.A.R.S is to deactivate it once you're finished using it. So if you're fighting a boss, for example, with M.A.R.S and the boss dies, there is no sense keeping your M.A.R.S active unless there's a big spawn of enemies you want to kill. Quite often it's quite prudent to actually deactivate M.A.R.S so that you can start to charge that battery back up again. So it's also worth noting that there isn't really a cooldown on this. As long as you have above 25% battery, you can use it. So when we activate it, what will happen is we'll get surrounded by the M.A.R.S and we'll have our two weapons. So at the moment I have Nidhog and Hydra equipped, so I've got the scythe and the cannon. So if I activate M.A.R.S now, so this is M.A.R.S itself. So you can see it's like a support weapon that follows you around. It does kind of change how your movement works, so you do kind of float around. So general movement is pretty similar to normal. You can also see we do have this gauge in the center now, which is our active cooldown time. So with M.A.R.S, basic controls, you still have access to your dash as normal. So if you press right trigger, you do a quick dash. You can also jump. You can also jump a few times in the air with this. You can do slow descent like you can normally. So as for attacking, on our front palette here we've got the Nidhog. So with Nidhog, your standard attack, if I just go in to this bear here, our standard attack, if we do it from neutral, is a very quick sort of whip with the scythe. You can see the extra damage that we got there, that's from our sub-weapon that attacks periodically. So you can see as we continue attacking with this, we sort of do a chain of attacks which ends in this large overhead. So you can see with Nidhogg it is a very fast weapon. You can also hold the attack down with Nidhogg as well to do this sort of spinning attack. Actually reminds me a lot of the Saw Blade from the Charge Blade in Monster Hunter. So that's by holding the attack button down. But if we just keep pressing it, you get this attack instead, this combo chain. Now the advantage of Nidhogg is designed around counters. So if we just restore our battery again. So if we go over to this guy here, basically with Nidhogg, if you attack at the same time as getting attacked, you actually counter it. So it's not actually like a right button counter. You actually do it by attacking. So it's almost like Hunter Art Avenger. So you can see we actually get a counter off this by attacking at the same time. And it's quite a generous window, honestly. So that is the Nidhogg normal attack. Next up we have our Photon Art. So if we do this, do this spinning attack, which takes about 100 PP, so it is quite intensive. As usual, you do restore PP by attacking normally as well. So if we now do this up close, you can see it is very PP intensive, so you will be using your normal attacks a lot with Nidhogg, I find. It also says as well for this whirlwind as well that if the slash hits, what it does is it will actually buff your attack, and it will also keep your normal attack at the same stage, so you can cycle back into your normal attacks then at enhanced stage. So, and also with the Fortnite as well, this also nullifies enemy attacks while you attack. So if I go over here and do the Fortnite while it's attack, you can see there we just don't take damage. So next up, we just need to get some more batteries again. So you see it does run out quite fast. So next thing we need to cover with Nidhog is the weapon action. So for weapon action, we can fire a series of slashes in front of us, ending with an energy buzzsaw, or we can hold it to perform Nidhogg execution. So the standard one, if we just press the weapon action button, we do these slashes here. Now you can actually spam this. It's actually pretty good DPS to spam it. And if you hold this down, you get Nidhogg execution, which is like Nidhogg's super attack. Which doesn't really do a whole lot, honestly, but it's very quick to come out, so that is kind of Nidhogg at a glance. So next up, let's look at Hydra, which is our range option here that we've got equipped. So by default, our normal shot just fires a quick shot here. Again, the missiles are coming from the sub-weapon. If we hold this down, though, the rate of fire will gradually increase. And it eventually releases this charge shot as well. Now, while you're firing this little gauge at the bottom will increase. So again, if we just keep firing this gauge will increase. And now that's charged up. You can see now there's a little number 5 on our normal weapon action. Sorry, on our normal shot. What it does is when this gauge is full, it applies a boost to your normal shot, which means your next few shots will be this increased damage burst. So then when we try shooting again normally now, you can see those first 5 shots were much stronger. And then again, we go to this increased rate of fire, which starts building our gauge up again. And again, if we do this again, we continue to build the gauge up. We then get those shots transferred over to the normal shot, which then gives us the beams for 5 shots. So a lot of your basic rotation with Hydra for the normal shot is going to be using the rapid fire bullets to build that gauge up, which is then going to give you access to those charge beams. Now, our Fortnite for Hydra is quite an interesting one. So if you just do it uncharged, it fires a shot at the enemy and creates this green field. Anyone in this field, apart from yourself, will get a HP recovery. So it's like a support shot that will actually heal your allies, but crucially, it doesn't heal you. Alternatively, if you charge that shot, we get this blue field instead, and this reduces PP consumption for your allies. And again, doesn't affect yourself. So Hydra's Fortnite is actually a lot about supporting your party. So it heals people, it reduces their PP consumption, but it doesn't really have much effect on yourself. So for solo, it's probably not the best option to use, but it's still very, very useful. And next up, we've got to talk about the Hydra weapon action. So Hydra's weapon action, by default, just does this, which you might not be able to really tell what it's doing. So what this does is it essentially means that when you use the normal shots, your rate of fire will start at a higher rate. So if we do that now, and then go to our normal shots, you can see we start at the faster fire rate, which then obviously gets us to our laser beams faster as well. So I'm guessing that with Hydra, quite often you would use the weapon action to charge up, then you would go to your normal shots, you know, to get you to those beams faster. Then you'd use those 5 beam shots, and then use your weapon action again to charge back up again. So next, we need to talk about the charge weapon action. So the charge weapon action is one of the strongest skills that M.A.R.S has, but is quite awkward to actually use. So it's called Hydra Termination, and this is what you might have seen in the trailers. So this essentially turns Hydra into a huge railgun that fires one huge shot that does an absolute ton of damage. The downside is it has a very, very long startup, and you can be interrupted out of it. So you can see if I try and do it over here to this guy, if I start charging it now, for example, I get cancelled out of it straight away. So you need to be very careful when you use this. However, if you do charge up, what this looks like is... It's probably best to just show it. You can actually hold it for a bit as well if you want to. But when it's at this stage, at any point you can just release the weapon action button. So again, I'll show you that one more time, just so you can see actually how much damage it does. So that's 113,000 damage, and that actually didn't hit its weak point either. So that is Hydra in a nutshell. So what we'll do now is we'll reload the quest with the other two M.A.R.S weapons, and we'll go through those. Okay, so here we are back in the M.A.R.S training center, and now we've got our M.A.R.S equipped with Garm and Scylla. So with Garm, our standard attack is we swing the greatsword up for a combo up to 4 hits, and we also recover HP when attacks hit enemies, so it actually has a bit of life steal on it. So again, if we go in and we use the normal attack with Garm, you can see even this is quite a fast attack, honestly. The downside I find of Garm is that its attacks do kind of hit all over the place, so it's kind of hard to focus on specific weak points. You can see it's hitting the Crag Bear's fist quite a lot. But you can also see, it might be quite hard to see on video, but we are healing about 10 HP every hit, which I know is not much, but it's something. So that's our normal attack with Garm. So next up we have Absolute Shatter, which is the Garm Fortnite. So what this does is it dashes in on an enemy and launches a powerful attack, or you can press and hold it to spend all of your PP, dash in and perform a knockdown slash all around. So the standard use is this one, which you can see we basically dash in and just hit the enemy. So again, if we just recover our PP, because a lot of these Fortnites do use a lot of PP. If we charge this up, we finish it with that round slash as well, and the round slash knocks enemies down. The other thing about the Garm Advance there, this charge that we've been doing, is you are pretty much invulnerable to damage reactions while you're charging. So it says here that enemy attacks are actually nullified during that dash. So not only are you immune to damage reactions, but you're also just immune to damage. So it's essentially iframes. So I suppose if an enemy's about to attack you, you could just use that. You need about, I think it's about 150 PP to do it though, so it is very intensive. It's not something you can spam. But if an enemy's about to attack you, which we can actually show here, if we dash in, we were a little bit off time there. It should be noted that we do still have sort of dash counters as well with this. Let's try it again. So I guess we have to be like mid-dash. Let's try this again. Yeah, so as long as we're in mid-dash, we're invulnerable to damage. If we're in the startup, we still get hit. So that is the Fortnite for Garm. And next up, we have the Garm weapon action. So the weapon action by default is perform a slash in front of us. And again, this nullifies enemy attacks at the moment the attacks occur. You can also press and hold the weapon action to perform Garm detonation. So the standard one is just this slash, which actually does not bad damage, honestly. Or if we hold it, we do Garm detonation, which is like the Garm super. So we get that kind of charge up. You can release it early if you want to. It doesn't really make any difference though when it actually releases. You don't need to hold the button down all the way, but it does seem to go through that animation regardless. So I release there. You can see it still continues doing that. But it is quite nice damage, and it's quite focused damage as well. So quite good for focusing on a weak point. And that is kind of Garm in a nutshell, really. So you can see it's still pretty fast, honestly. But yeah, that is pretty much Garm in a nutshell. So let's get a bit more battery, and let's switch over to Scylla. So Scylla is probably what you would consider to be the most force-focused one. So Scylla uses a rod. So its normal attack actually hits from above. And this is actually fantastic for isolating weak points because it seems to target really precisely. If we hold it down, we also get a little dash in. So if you want to do a gap closer, Scylla is quite good for that because you can hit enemies from a distance and gap close at the same time. Or you can just press the button from a distance. What you can see as well is that as we're attacking, we're building this gauge up here. And when the gauge is full, we actually get more attacks. So you can see we get one attack there, one attack there if we keep pressing it. But if we keep pressing it on time, you can see we actually get more and more of them. It's kind of funny. This kind of reminds me a little bit of PSO in that you kind of time in your attacks almost. But by doing this, you can see we get a barrage of them instead. It's again very, very focused damage on weak points, so very, very good. So next up we have Scylla's, I guess, Photon Art. So for Scylla, the Photon Art is Meteor Rider. So this transforms the M.A.R.S and showers surrounding enemies with photon beams while moving at high speed. You can press and hold the PA button to sustain the transformation for as long as you have PP. So if we just press it, we fire a load of shots off, and we also, it's kind of hard to see there, but you kind of surf M.A.R.S. So we'll just get our PP back. So again, if you watch our character, she'll kind of surf on the M.A.R.S for a little bit. So again, good for closing distance, I guess. Or if we hold the button, so if I do it from over here, we can surf for a bit longer. Now it does drain your PP super fast, so you can only surf for a very short amount of time. So I don't think it's going to be something you can use as like a travel PA or anything because it doesn't last long enough. So next we have the weapon action for Scylla. So with Scylla, fire an explosive shell in front of us, or we can press and hold it to perform Scylla retaliation. So if we just press it, we fire this shell here. I think your character's meant to be like clicking their fingers. It kind of sounds like it. It's actually really decent damage, and again, very focused. If we hold the button, we get Scylla retaliation, which is a very sort of over-the-top nuke, much like the one that Hydra uses. So with Scylla retaliation, again, if we hold the button down for the weapon action, you can probably see where this is going. So again, once you hear that beep, you can release it. And we get that huge laser. It reminds me a little bit of things like satellite cannon, but on a much bigger scale. So again, I'll shout one more time. Also, just like the Hydra overboost, you can get cancelled out of this as well. So you're only going to really use this on enemy downs and things like that, because otherwise you are going to get cancelled out of it a lot. But it is huge damage if you can pull it off. So it does kind of seem like the melee ones might seem quite underwhelming, but they are very quick to come out and quite spammable. Whereas the range ones are obviously much bigger scale, very sort of cinematic, but are very, very easy to get cancelled out of as well. So that's kind of an overview of how the M.A.R.S abilities work. Now, there are some more benefits you can get from M.A.R.S through the skill tree. So there are some general skills. Honestly, most of the generalized skills are just things that increase stats for the most part. So again, if we go back to the class counter and we go to the M.A.R.S skills and the skill trees, You can see we've already covered this. There is some different skills for each of the main weapons and for the sub-weapons. So these, I'll only go into them very, very briefly because it will depend on which kind of variant of M.A.R.S you want to use. But for Garm, we've got Garm Heat Charge. So this allows you to store up to 2 energy charges by hitting enemies with attacks a certain number of times. And it boosts your potency and HP recovery based on the number of charges. It also boosts your Garm detonation as well if you've got this as well. Then we have Garm Quick Assault. So weapon automatically switches to Garm and rushes forward with an attack when you successfully dodge with forward thrust. So this is a way of kind of dodging and very, very quickly getting in with Garm. We have Garm Killing Prize, which recovers HP and PP when you destroy nearby enemies with Garm. Garm Risky Style, which allows you to actually spend HP to perform 2 attacks. So it says if you hold the normal attack, you will spend HP and perform up to 2 attacks. And then the normal attacks of all armaments used after this attack are changed to their final attack. So it basically gives you a large offensive buff, I guess, at the expense of HP. But what you have to remember is that you are also healing HP using Garm as well. So then finally we have Garm Beat Up. So this is hitting a downed enemy with Garm detonation extends the length of the time it's down. Some powerful enemies are not affected, but Garm detonation's potency increases instead. So this is really good, obviously, so you can increase the time that enemies are downed, which is obviously fantastic for getting damage in on them. But if that enemy is not affected, it will increase the potency instead. So next for Nidhog, we have Nidhog Weaken Marker. So this marks enemies after you've hit them a certain number of times. And what this does is, at first I thought this was like blight rounds, but it isn't. What this does is it actually reduces the damage that you take from the enemy. So it weakens the enemy in terms of the attack it does on you. So think of this as kind of a little bit like gelling from PSO. So this essentially weakens the enemy and reduces the damage it does to you. Also, if you hit a marked enemy with Nidhogg Execution, it'll cause an explosion which does additional attacks. Then we have Nidhogg Add Attack. This produces an additional attack when an attack is successfully nullified. So if you are parrying attacks, you'll get an extra hit back on the enemy. So it's like an auto parry essentially. We have Nidhogg Delay Action. This, if you delay your attack after a normal attack, it will produce another attack. This is kind of awkward to use, so you basically need to delay your normal attack every so often, and you'll get an extra attack for doing that. And the additional attack potency also increases according to the length of the delay. So I guess if you're waiting for an enemy to come back into range, you could potentially delay your attack and time it for when the enemy gets back into range of you, and then release a big attack when they get in range. We have Nidhogg Extended Time. This is, if you hit an enemy with a 5th normal attack, it will extend your M.A.R.S usage time. Now, the amount it restores by isn't much. You are still going to run out of time. It's not like you can just maintain M.A.R.S infinitely doing this, but it just adds a little bit more time on. So finally, we have Nidhogg Weakness. This is, if you hit an enemy that's already got the Nidhogg Weaken marker on it with the explosion, you will get a temporary damage increase. So then that does kind of give you the Blight Round effect, but only if you hit them with the explosion. For Hydra, we have Hydra Overcharge. This builds up a gauge when you hit a certain number of times. Once the gauge is full, a certain number of normal attacks will become powerful attacks, and for as long as the effect is active, the amount of PP that each weapon recovers naturally will be increased. This is what I showed in the video a little bit earlier with those charge beams that Hydra can use. We have Hydra Evade Counter. This is automatically counter attack when you dodge an enemy attack with sidestep or quick evade while locked on. So again, I showed that briefly. So if you do a dash evade or a sidestep or a quick evade, you'll automatically counter. We have Hydra Tactical Reload. This is if you press the weapon action button after some attack, such as the last attack in a combo, you'll start Hydra's next normal attack at a higher rate of fire. We have Hydra Forceful Attack. This is a normal attack becomes a powerful attack when PP is at 5 or less. So the powerful attacks are the beam shots. So you get basically 3 beam shots if your PP is at 5 or less. So Hydra almost encourages you to sort of burn your PP out. And then we have Hydra extended time, which is if you hit an enemy with Hydra termination, which is the huge railgun shot, you'll get extended M.A.R.S usage time. But bear in mind, you're probably spending a lot of usage time by using Hydra termination, so it might cancel its usefulness out. And then for Scylla, we have Scylla Starlink, which is when enemies remain within a certain range, or if you hit them with attacks, up to 3-star insignia will appear. Using a weapon action attack in that state will consume the stars and make your explosive rounds more powerful depending on their number. You lose 1 star when enemies are out of range for a while, you're hit by an attack, or you sidestep. So this encourages you to sort of maintain the offensive on the enemy without trying to evade. Which with Scylla is a little bit easier because Scylla does have quite good maneuverability. We have Scylla High Maneuver, which is Scylla normal attacks performed after activating a PA with each weapon change to a maximum of 3 highly mobile attacks. We have Scylla Invincible mode. This is if you hit an enemy with a weapon action attack while you have 3 stars, it will make you temporarily invulnerable. You do not recover PP while in the invulnerable state, but Scylla Retaliation's potency is increased. So it will buff your huge sort of satellite cannon attack, but you won't recover PP while you're invulnerable. Which kind of makes sense because it would be broken otherwise. We have Scylla as attack, which is automatically attacks when your enemies remain within a certain range and you don't take damage. So Scylla will actually attack for you as well. And then we have Scylla Annihilation, which is hitting an enemy with Scylla Retaliation temporarily creates a field around you that occasionally produces attacks over a wide area. So not only if you hit them with the huge satellite cannon, it will then continue to attack things that are nearby as well. So I get the impression this would be really good for taking care of bosses that have ads. So you'd use the cannon on the boss and then the Annihilation would take care of the ads. Then we have a few skills for the sub weapons. So for Fenrir, we've got one that just automatically produces the support attacks and increases your movement speed. We've got one that allows you to perform 2 consecutive sidesteps. And we've got one that allows you to do an additional attack when you dodge an attack. Obviously only if you're using Fenrir. If you're using Fafnir, you can again get a buff that decreases damage you take once your HP is under a certain level. You get D-Band Field, which creates a field that reduces damage taken centered around where your attack hits. So Fafnir will attack the enemy, and wherever Fafnir's attack hits, anyone nearby there will get increased defense. And then we have Fafnir Add Attack, which produces additional attacks when you successfully nullify an attack. So this will obviously work very well with things like the Garm Charge or anything else that can nullify attacks. We also have Lindworm. Lindworm. So this increases your natural PP recovery rate and PP recovery rate while attacking. We have Lindworm Jammer. This debuffs enemies within your field of view and makes them do less damage to you. So this essentially casts Gelling on enemies. Is the nearest way I can describe it. It just automatically weakens them. But it's only enemies within your field of view. So if something comes up behind you, that won't be affected by it. And we also have Lindworm Add Attack, which produces an additional attack after hitting a certain amount of times. So then under this we have a lot of general skills. So these are the big sort of point sinks, but they are very, very basic. So the only ones that are sort of any different to your regular skill trees are these first 3. So we have Quick Evade. This is if you jump with back, left or right held down while locked on, it will change your jump to a maneuver that dodges attacks while moving rapidly. We have Forward Thrust, which is jumping with forward held down while locked on, changes jump to a maneuver that dodges attacks while moving rapidly. And Vertical Thrust, which is jumping without pressing a directional button while locked on, changes the jump to a maneuver that dodges attacks while moving rapidly to the same height as the lock-on location. So these all work very, very similar. So what I'll do is I'll quickly jump back in and I'll show you how these work. So here we are back in the familiar site of the training center again. So what we need to do is we need to lock on, use M.A.R.S. So if we jump while locked on, you can see what we're doing there is we're jumping to the height of that lock on. You might not be able to tell there, but if we go over to the remote over here and lock onto this, which is obviously much higher, if we then while we're locked on, then if we hold jump, you can see we automatically jump to that height. So this is fantastic for taking care of airborne enemies, because we can just go over to them, lock on, and then go. Just make sure you're not inputting a direction while you do it. Similarly, if we input a direction while we're locked on and doing jump, so if we go forward, we do that very quick thrust backwards. You see we get this like thrust that we can use to get around very quickly. This honestly reminds me so much of Armored Core. So it's just a way of like very quickly repositioning yourself. And again, if we lock back onto that remote that's over there and go over and do a neutral jump, we go to that height immediately. So for example, you could do things like you could dash up and then immediately start shooting or attacking. So it just gets us up to that height much easier. So that's what those skill trees do. You can also get that little boost by doing the dash as well, but if you hold it, you can even do this in mid-air as well. You can see as well, we're not really losing any height. Provided we keep on inputting that, we're not really losing much height, maybe a very slight amount. It also doesn't use any PP at all either as well, so you can just do this indefinitely as long as you've got M.A.R.S left. So that's how those skills work anyway. So I think that's more or less it for M.A.R.S, honestly. One last thing I wanted to cover is, obviously, when the gauge runs out, your M.A.R.S will disappear. This will also disappear regardless what you're doing in M.A.R.S. So M.A.R.S is just charged, so if we do this now... So you can see, so that 25% battery gives us about 30 seconds of usage overall. So what I'll do is I'll let it get down to just under 10 seconds left, and then I'll try using the Hydra ultimate ability. Sorry, the Scylla ultimate ability even. So I'll try doing it now. And I'll hold it deliberately. So you see it just cancels out of it and we lose the attack. So just make sure to keep an eye on the time remaining on your M.A.R.S because you don't want to get caught out and get screwed out of a lot of damage. So I think that's more or less everything to cover about M.A.R.S for now. Again, I've only had a little bit of chance to play around with it, but it does seem like quite a useful addition overall. And the added mobility is quite fun as well. It'd be cool if we had more weapons in future and get a bit more variance in it, but I do like the 4 that we've got so far. The sub-weapons, honestly, I don't really need to go into them too much because essentially all they'll do is just fire the occasional missile at enemies and provide the odd little boosts. The main meat of M.A.R.S is the main weapons. Yeah, hope you found that relatively useful. If you do have any questions about M.A.R.S, feel free to leave them in the comments and I will try and answer what I can. As usual, if you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, subscribing or joining as a member. We do a few videos a week, normally mainly based on older Phantasy Star games, but we do a little bit of PSO NGS as well. So yeah, I'll leave that video there for now anyway. You can also follow me on Twitter at Section Skylight. I'm also planning to do some Twitch streams at some point in the future as well, but we also stream on YouTube every week on a Sunday as well. But yeah, I'll leave that there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.